One thing that I did want to mention that I feel like sort of was lost during discussion at APW committee when this was initially discussed was that we are borrowing less this year than we are actually retiring in bonds we're paying off from 20 years ago. So this issuance will not increase the overall debt that the city carries, but will decrease the amount of debt that the city carries. So that is a very good thing. That is the goal that we are trying to get to, is to lower the amount of debt that the city currently carries.
And that savings is projected $500,000. I probably should have called that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly.
Okay, so, I'm glad to see that the $700,000 that was pretty much associated with engineering salaries wasn't removed, along with the library, about $500,000 in the library funds. However, we really need to look to keep, our debts to a minimum. And I have a lot of questions about this still that have not been answered. So I'm going to just start asking some questions. And Mayor Biss just cut me off when my time's up. This is about fiscal discipline, and I'm concerned that there's a lot of expenditures here. We haven't even really analyzed what from the ARPA funds could possibly be covered. And as Hitesh mentioned last time, Mr. Desai mentioned last time,
can I just ask what page is she reading from in the packet so I can...
Wait, everyone's, sorry, your time's paused. Sorry about that. There was some crosstalk here. What was your question, Councilmember Braithwaite?
Just trying to get what page. What page are you reading from? Just
527 has the list of capital projects.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just want to say things like, I just wonder, there's many projects like, Green Bay Road, Howard Street, Main Street. I have a question about the Central Street Bridge construction, how much of this could actually be covered somewhere else. Again, we want to avoid debt. Debt is expensive, and it goes on for, probably the next 20 years. I'd like to know, what are the Oakton Street Improvement Phase 2 Engineering Services? What does that refer to, and why is this necessary right now? And bridge inspection, is this a staff inspection? Are we bringing outside people in? Why is that on there? General, and what is general Phase 1 engineering? This is just not clear. Like in pavement marking, that sounds like regular maintenance type thing. We should not have regular maintenance on bonding out. Same thing with street patching program. That's something that we do regularly. That should be part of our annual budget. Street rejuvenation. Can you talk to us about what that even means? And, like 50-50 sidewalk improvements. Again, that sounds to me like routine maintenance. And again, traffic calming, bicycle and pedestrian improvements. Please explain that to us. And then again, we have the Beck Park expansion Phase 1 planning that says in-house. And again, it sounds to me in-house feels like we're talking about, you're gonna have to explain that. Again, in-house, just like you removed the last $700,000 when I question in-house spending, meaning usually staff that's already being paid. The dog park planning and design, that's also listed as in-house. Again, what does that refer to? Staff that's being paid. Love Lake Park repairs, sounds like maintenance. Mason Park, again, in-house. That doesn't sound to me like that should be that should be part of the bonding. The McCullough Park, that was, last I looked, that said 22. So why are we funding that now? And also with so what happened too, I think it's really important to point out, and I realize I might be getting to the end, but $700,000 was swapped out. It was, I think Laura Biggs said, it was, staff time that might lead to a capital project, meaning the animal shelter. And now instead of saying $700,000 in in-house services, now it just says like animal shelter, and that is scheduled for 22. So it just looks like we're playing kind of a little bit of a shell game here. At any rate, I can go on and on. I have many, many questions about this bond. The animal shelter, again, this was added in lieu of, it was just like you swapped one thing out from another. We reduced, it's like we're just keeping the debt ceiling the same, so we reduced that, but it's just like you're just trying to maintain the same size of the bond. And this is a problem. I mean, that's great that we're reducing it, but it doesn't mean we should be carrying on this way. And so I do have many concerns. I don't think we should be passing this bond. Of course, refi, if it actually does save us money over the long run only, should we refi? And I'm all about refinancing at a lower rate. But again, let's just make sure over the long haul it is going to save us money. I also have questions about like the HVAC, the levy on the water. Can that be covered with ARPA? The Civic Center planning design services for $700,000. No, I'm sorry, $200,000. What is that about? We haven't yet voted. I mean, what does that mean? The design, Civic Center planning and design. Someone should, $200,000 for that. What is that about? Lovelace Park Fieldhouse roofing. Again,
so council member,
that would be me.
That is the end of your 5. Obviously, feel free to wrap up, but that's your 5 minutes.
Okay, all right. Okay. And again, the in-house engineering decreased by $700,000, and we just switched it out for $700,000 for an animal shelter that is scheduled for next year. So, we went ahead and proceeded with McCulloch Park without passing bonding. We shouldn't be now without passing the funding. We don't need to be spending $700,000 now for a project in 22 for the animal shelter. So, at any rate, I'd like to amend this so that this can go actually to the, I'd rather see this go to our Finance and Budget Committee for greater scrutiny so that we can really see where we can save and also consider what aspects of this can be covered by ARPA. So I guess that was an amendment.
A referral. Sorry, what did you say at the end there, council member?
So I'm not sure if I did this right, but I want to amend this to go to our Finance and Budget Committee to be approved by the committee that will be scrutinizing our finances.
So you want to move to refer this to the Finance and Budget Committee?
Right. That's what I want to do.
1 second. Oh, that's a good point. I'm sorry. There's already a motion on the table, so what you'd have to do is move to table the current motion in order for it to be in order to refer this somewhere else.
Okay, so I'd like to
hold on one second, Councilmember Braithwaite.
So it's more of a point of information, and Director Stonebeck informed us at our meeting that, and I don't want to misrepresent what he said. It sounded like there were some elements of this that are being spent now. Am I misrepresenting, or am I misrepresenting that?
I would ask.
Alderman Braithwaite, this is Laura Biggs. I'm the city engineer.
Yeah.
I just wanted to provide a point of clarification.
Thank you.
Is that when the budget is adopted, it starts the clock on some of the spending of the projects that are being paid for by the general obligation bond. So in February, the city council passed a resolution that allowed us to spend bond money, although the bonds were not actually sold yet. And that's something that happens every year on an annual basis. Approximately 66% of the general obligation bond is actually committed to awarded projects at the moment. That money would either need to be made up or we would have to stop those projects.
Laura, why don't you go ahead and identify? So, for example, allocating now $700,000, doing a switcheroo on the animal shelter from what was staff time to now a capital project when you said it was going to lead to it, that's not scheduled until next year. We've already broken ground on McCulloch Park, $1 million project. That hasn't been approved yet. So do you want to go through the 66% of the items that you are suggesting that have already been pre-approved, the financing for these?
I I did.
Let me
I want to come back. I think this is not the way to do this.
So let me jump into direct.
The finance.
Let me just jump in for a second, Councilmember, to direct traffic. So I think the questions you asked are important and deserve an answer. And I'm not going to be overly aggressive, but your 5 minutes are up. So you can ask a really quick follow up, but let's let Ms. Biggs reply. And I think Councilmember Braithwaite had one last.
Yes, I did.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Laura, I'll yield. I just had one last statement when you're finished with the.
I just want to clarify about the animal shelter. So after the budget was adopted, the City of Evanston received the notice of the Cook County grant and worked to determine how to best partner with Cook County and the Evanston Animal Shelter Association. And it was ultimately determined and adopted as part of an agreement with Cook County that the City Council approved, that the City of Evanston would proceed with the project and that we would basically be required as the city to put in $1.5 to $3 million, depending on the cost of the final project. And then staff committed to coming back with the concept design that and would set the final budget for the project.
Laura, can you provide the document that says that we had to commit to spending that much money of our own? I don't think that's accurate.
Okay, I don't have it in my hands this exact second, but I'll be happy to provide it.
And I'm making the point again that we broke ground on this McCullough Park. This one's scheduled for 22. We don't need to take out $700,000 now and bond for this project that's scheduled for 22. Anyway.
The construction for the animal shelter project is scheduled for 22, but the design and the planning actually take place ahead of that number. And so we're planning on spending money to fund the animal shelter out of the cash balance of the capital improvement fund because we didn't have it in the adopted budget. But those contracts were neat. My apologies, please.
Why don't you go ahead, Ms. Biggs?
We would need to proceed with the planning and the design now to keep to the schedule that we agreed to with Cook County. And we plan to take that out of the cash balance of the capital improvement fund because we've closed out some projects in 2017 that had some savings over what was awarded in the contracts and hope to pay for that. The bond council made us aware that it was not a good practice to be bonding our salaries, although this is a practice we've used in the past. So we decided, in order to comply with the bond council and the arguments and discussion that Councilmember Kelly had previously presented, we would then pay for this year at least, because it's not budgeted in the general fund, those salaries out of the same proceeds I just described that would pay for the animal shelter, but then it leaves the animal shelter unfunded for this year.
Thank you.
And that's why we made a swap.
Right. Thank you. So we're going to a little more traffic direction or sort of description of the traffic. Mr. Cummings has corrected me about the procedure. A motion to refer is in fact subsidiary, so it is in order. So Councilmember Kelly's initial motion to refer was in order. I stand corrected. Is there a second to that motion?
I think I had a comment that I just wanted to make in its order of clarification prior to her referral as I was making a statement.
So this will be, I'll give you another one, but this will be your last comment on this issue. Go ahead, Councilmember.
So I think that Councilmember Kelly raises a really, good questions. And for those that have not been through the capital improvement process, it takes years for a project to come in. And so these items that you see before you didn't come from nowhere. These are all projects that we've discussed over the years. These are all projects that we've inherited both from current council members as well as past council members of projects that have been discussed at ward meetings citywide, and that's how they come into our capital improvement process. The other thing that I would encourage you to do, Councilmember Kelly, because you have so many questions, is understand the process, and then secondly, have staff explain the various funding tools that help us to get there. And that's where and why I asked Laura to
So we
explain it.
respond to that now, and there is a motion on the table,
I guess I'll finish up by saying, like, the questions are not going to be answered from this council floor, and to take some time while this is in introduction phase.
I appreciate that from both of you. Is there a second to Councilmember Kelly's motion, first of all?
I will second her motion.
So Councilmember Reed seconds the motion. So the motion currently on the floor is the motion to refer item A12 to the Finance and Budget Committee. The next two speakers are Councilmember Reed, followed by Nusma.
Thank you, Mayor Biss. Well, my goal here is, I do remember Hitesh, our CFO, mentioning some time sensitivity relating to some of this. I think there is, while I am supportive of sending the new dollar amount to the Finance and Budget Committee, I do think it makes sense to move forward with the refinancing of bonds. And so I think it would make sense to move forward with the refinancing of bonds, since that I would believe is fairly non-controversial. Councilmember Kelly can correct me if I'm wrong. And then refer the rest of the bond issuance for the new expenditures, the 2021 bonds for the new expenditures, to the Finance and Budget Committee.
So I want to understand, was that a question of staff? Was that a...
I guess that's Councilmember Kelly, since you made the motion that I seconded. Is that something you are fine with, moving forward with the refinancing of bonds, but then holding or sending to committee the new issuances?
Yeah, that's what the assurance that I assume the new refinance isn't just an annual savings, but a savings overall over the life of the refinanced bond. Hitesh, can you confirm that? How much will be saved over the life of the bond by refinancing versus what if we had continued paying off the current bond at the rate?
Right.
What's the difference in monetary?
Sure. So good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, Councilmember Kelly, you're right, that is the savings. And again, these are based on the preliminary numbers and continues to fluctuate depending on the market, which we don't control. The other thing is about the Councilmember Reed's suggestion about separating two things, the new money and the refunding, and that might be hard. And I would, I have the bond counsel, Sharon Levy from Chapman and Cutler, and even Ms. McKenzie from our financial advisor, and they would definitely talk. But I think, we try to do both the things at the same time to generate more savings and to expedite the process and keep it on the kind of our clock. So all the parties involved here, they can devote their time and we can kind of efficiently finish the process. So I have Sharon Levy, if you Mayor's okay. I would ask her to if she has any kind of opinion about separating two things.
Yeah, that would be fine.
And if
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
I just want to say I understand that it's important to keep them together in terms of fees and everything else, that we don't necessarily want to separate them. But I also think we're not running a risk with rates at this point with the new unfortunate strain of the virus. I don't think we're going to. I think it's not like this is a panic mode where we have to refinance like this week.
well, then we don't need the bond. I'll just withdraw it. That's fine. And
No, I don't think we need to separate it.
we can continue on with the original motion.
Okay. In that case, Councilmember Nusma.
Mr. Mayor, would you mind putting me on the list? Is this Melissa?
You mean to speak?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
I'm glad we have the new, or we will have the new the Finance and Budget Committee to be able to go through next year's bond issue with a fine-tooth comb. It would be great if we could do that with this year's bond issue, or if we would have been able to do that with this year's bond issue. I guess my question to staff is, do we have enough time to go back to the drawing board and fine-tooth comb this at a committee and still meet the timeline that we need to meet?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, we do not have that kind of time. We've already pushed back the timeline 2 weeks because this was on the agenda at the first meeting in July. We set up these timelines in such a way that we're coordinating with both our financial advisor and our bond counsel, and the necessity of continuing to pay the bills for the projects that were already approved in last year's budget. So as Lara Biggs mentioned, the council passed a resolution in February binding us to utilize bond proceeds to fund the projects identified, and those projects started on the premise that that resolution was passed and that the budget was passed to fund those specific projects. So we draw down the capital improvement fund to a sort of bare minimum level before we borrow, so that we can achieve savings by not paying interest on bonds until the very last minute. So we've got a little bit of time. Like this was held obviously, and so now we're talking about it tonight, and we'll, potentially be talking about it again in 2 weeks if it's passed tonight. But there isn't, months that this could go to the committee that's currently being created for further vetting before, the clock would run out and there wouldn't be any additional monies to continue to pay the bills on the projects that are currently in process. And Lara or Hitesh, feel free to weigh in additionally if you feel I didn't cover everything.
So I would just state that there's approximately 20 contracts that have been awarded that utilize the general obligation bonds to date for a total of approximately $6 million. And those include everything from the Howard Street project that's ongoing, where we have a contract with the federal government and the Illinois Department of Transportation that we've committed to certain monies, and the city of Chicago has also done that. To things like the Lovelace Pathway Improvements Project, which has been delayed for a couple of years while we worked to secure grant funding, which we weren't able to, but that we've told the community members for 2 years that we're going to do the work. But once Resolution 16-R-21 was adopted, allowing us to spend against bond proceeds, we proceeded with this year's capital improvement program as it was approved in the budget.
Thank you. Councilmember Wynn.
Yes, well, I think some of my question, the points I wanted to raise have been raised. And the key issue I wanted to ask was the timeliness issue of these bonds, and what would be the cost to the city if we waited. Because when I think that City Engineer Biggs is saying that when we shut down these projects, we can't just turn them back on again at some point. You have to restage, and the cost of the project goes up enormously each time. So I don't think, I agree with Councilmember Newsma that for next year, the Finance and Budget Committee can take a close look and get many more of these questions answered. Councilmember Kelly, I know you're shaking your head.
And so because we started McCullough Park, we didn't,
let's not have a,
we don't have to spend $700,000 now. We have $2 million given to us.
Let's not have a back and forth here.
I'm sorry. I'd like to finish speaking, please. And I do agree with Councilmember Braithwaite. Many of these projects take several years. Most projects take at least 2 or 3 years. A park will take 4 years. A large park will take 4 years. And part of that is design and engineering. Construction is actually the very last portion of a lot of these projects. Sometimes more time is spent on the design and engineering and making sure that the specifications are correct and before the construction moves forward. And it's frustrating to people to have to wait. But that's the timeline of a lot of all of our projects. And so within doing that, you have to pay for design and engineering. I do agree that we should not be paying staff on this, but for most of our projects, we contract for the design and engineering. Our staff is not large enough to do that. So that design and engineering is part of any capital improvement project that we have ever had. So that's appropriate that that's there, because that's all part of paving a road. Paving a road includes design, and so that's what we have. That's part of capital improvement. And I feel really strongly that we should not delay this any further. It will only cost us more money. And if you want to re-examine this process for next year, I would support that. But we can't delay this now. It will cost every single resident in Evanston.
Melissa, at the last one we reduced it by
Kelly, please.
1.2 million. So why don't you think there's more on there that should come off? I mean, what's the
Councilmember Kelly, please.
There's so much on there that we don't need to.
This is not in order. Please.
Sorry.
This is for intro. I'll say one more thing, Mr. Mayor. This is for introduction tonight. I don't think it should be referred. We don't even have a finance and budget committee staffed yet. We don't know which members of the council are going to be on it yet. We're almost in August. It's very difficult to hold meetings in August. We need to move forward on this, because we have had this issue appear occasionally, and when the staff actually figures out how much it's going to cost, it's huge. And I can't support that. That will cost every single resident in Evanston more money for projects that are desperately needed.
Thank you. Councilmember Sufferton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it sounds like everybody said things that are true. So I guess this is more of a question or half a referral going forward, but would it be anticipated that Finance and Budget would be the committee that would handle authorization of general obligation bonds going forward rather than Administration of Public Works? Because I do hear the point about that we're asking this to be looked at by a committee that doesn't exist yet, which is problematic, but is that something that the Rules Committee should discuss?
So under the most recent rules passed by the City Council, the last City Council meeting that adopted the Finance and Budget Committee, one of the places of jurisdiction was in fact capital projects and funding for those projects. So yes, the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, thank you.
No one else is asking to speak for the first time. So for the second time, with 4 minutes left on your clock, Councilmember Reed.
4 minutes. So I'll just say that the idea that that staff or we, the city, committed money or started projects without having the funding in line, I think isn't the best practice, and I hope moving forward that we don't start projects and commit the city to expenditures before it's been approved by the City Council. I will also say that, some of my colleagues mentioned that, these projects are years old. If there's anyone who has had a ward meeting, or if there's about the animal shelter, I think that's fairly new, and that's a fairly large expenditure, and that's not something, from my understanding, that is not something that has been discussed at any ward meeting or really too many public meetings. And so, I think it makes sense to hold this or refer this to the committee. It has not. It's been created. The committee exists. We adopted. Oh shucks. I guess we didn't adopt it yet.
We adopted it, and I think we're going to amend some of its specs in a few minutes.
Okay, so we did adopt it. So it exists. Great. So the committee does exist, and so it's an official committee. I think while we haven't appointed any of the committee members yet, it will happen soon, and I think we can refer to that committee and get it off the ground. So I will end my comments there.